Good afternoon, good morning to all of you. I will give a very brief presentation introducing the Secretariat's activities for enhancing effective participation in the work of the CRC and the POP-ROC. I will introduce the mandate, the benefits, and a little bit of history, as well as the activities that are undertaken and organized by the Secretariat under this mandate. The mandate to enhance effective participation in the work of the CRC and the POP-ROC to cooperate and exchange information among scientific and technical bodies stems from the synergy decisions. And here you find the first ones, the first series. In 2008-2009, the conferences of the parties adopted the recommendations of the ad hoc joint working group, which requested the secretariats to facilitate the exchange of relevant information between technical and scientific bodies of the three conventions through sharing of information with one another. In 2010, at EXCOP1 in Bali, the parties requested the Secretariat in the Omnibus decision to prepare joint activities to be included in the work plans of the three conventions being approved in the upcoming ordinary meetings of the same conventions. This program of work or work plans should have included activities to facilitate the exchange of relevant information between the technical and scientific bodies of the three conventions. As a result, in 2011, the three conferences of the parties included in their respective programs of work joint activities with the aim of enhancing cooperation among scientific and technical bodies of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and to identify common issues and linkages between them. This activity was initially called F6. Then, in 2013, during the last COPs that took place, the conferences of the parties adopted a technical assistance program, including activities on cross-cutting issues such as support of the work of the scientific bodies of the Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. It is now called Activity 17, and it is on training capacity building activities to enhance the implementation of the three conventions at regional and national levels. In 2013, there was the second extraordinary conference of the parties of the three conventions, and at this extraordinary COP, the conference of the parties adopted the second omnibus decision, providing a new mandate for this activity for the future, which is the current mandate. And this decision recommends to accelerate the implementation of joint activities between the POP-ROC and CRC in 2014-2015 to align the scientific bodies' working arrangements, to allow for mutual information sharing and effective participation, and requested them to discuss further steps to enhance the coordination between them. Now I will quickly mention the benefits for the parties and other stakeholders. The activities planned by the Secretariat under this mandate are targeting past, current, and future members of the POP-ROC and CRC, as well as parties and observers. The benefits for such members and parties of an effective participation and coordination between the POP-ROC and the CRC are first, the exchange of information on current names of chemicals and risk evaluations of chemicals included in both conventions, which will enhance efficiency of both scientific bodies and avoid duplication of efforts. Secondly, these activities aim at increasing the opportunities for networking among experts to exchange experiences and support the work of institutions in the UN regions. Finally, the activities aim at building capacity. the inception workshops, which are workshops for new members of the CRC, are planned and are included in these activities, and CRC members can participate in the POPROC sessions as observers. Support is provided by the Secretariat in the day-to-day activities and during the intersessional work. Webinars and workshops will be organized and are organized to enhance the effective participation of members from developing countries and countries with economies in transition. So several activities are planned this year. In particular, for the second time, the 10th meetings of the CRC and the POPROC will be held back-to-back in October 2014 in Rome, in Italy. Several webinars were organized, taking place on the topic of effective participation and coordination between the two scientific bodies, and this webinar is part of this series. Workshops will be organized for members and other stakeholders of CRC and POPROC. One will be held in December 2014 for English-speaking African countries, and 2 regional workshops will be organized next year in 2015. In 2013, so in the past, another workshop of this series took place in Senegal, in Dakar, for French-speaking African countries, and an orientation workshop for new CRC members took place this year in Rome, in Italy. I thank you very much for your attention. This concludes my presentation, and I give the floor to Dan, our host, to introduce the other presentations. Thanks.
Hello, good afternoon, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would like, where's my presentation, please? Okay, so then I start again by welcoming you first to this WebEx session, and I would like to give a short presentation on the intersessional work of the Chemical Review Committee of the Rotterdam Convention. Before going into the details, I would like to provide some background information on the CRC as such and on its role under the Convention. The Chemical Review Committee was established by the Conference of the Parties at its first meeting, and it consists of 31 independent experts from all the various UN regions. The role of the Chemical Review Committee is to analyze the notifications of final regulatory action taken by parties on a particular chemical, which also includes then the review of the corresponding supporting documentation submitted by those parties. And in addition, the Chemical Review Committee also reviews the information received from a party when it proposes the listing of a severely hazardous pesticide formulation. And those parties are also requested to submit some supporting documentation, which is then reviewed by the CRC. And depending on the outcome of the reviews undertaken by the CRC, it may recommend to the Conference of the Parties the listing of a certain chemical in Annex 3 to the Rotterdam Convention. What is the procedure before it comes to the listing of a chemical in Annex 3? The work of the Chemical Review Committee is triggered by notification submitted by parties to the Rotterdam Convention, and those notifications are on certain chemicals that have been banned or severely restricted by a given party. So the procedure starts with with parties that ban certain chemicals, and those parties submit a notification to the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention. The Secretariat then informs all parties on these bans or severe restrictions by making information available in the big circular. In addition, the Secretariat verifies the notifications against the Annex 1 criteria, and if all Annex 1 criteria are met, then the Secretariat submits those notifications to the Chemical Review Committee for their review. The CRC then reviews the notifications, and depending on the outcome of that review, then may recommend the listing of those chemicals in Annex 1 to the Rotterdam Convention. However, the decision on the listing is taken by the COP, and then if the COP agrees on the listing, then the chemical will be listed in Annex 3 to the Convention, and if the COP does not agree to the listing, then the chemical stays off Annex 3. So this is the procedure for chemicals that are notified, but there's also the possibility for parties that are developing countries or countries with economies in transition to submit a proposal for the listing of a severely hazardous pesticide formulation when such country experiences specific problems when using this chemical in their territory. The proposal is then also sent to the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention, and the Secretariat then follows again the normal procedural steps, which means that the Secretariat verifies the proposal against the criteria listed in Part 1 of Annex 4. In addition, the proposal is published in the big circular, and the Secretariat also collects some additional information on that chemical, which then also is submitted together with the proposal to the Chemical Review Committee for review. And again, depending on the outcome of the work done by the Chemical Review Committee, this severely hazardous pesticide formulation containing a certain chemical may be proposed for listing in Annex 3 to the Convention. This proposal is again sent to the Conference of the Parties, and the Conference of the Parties takes the decision either to list the chemical or again to not list the chemical. The Chemical Review Committee uses various sources of information for its work, and this information is in particular information contained in the notifications submitted by notifying parties. In addition, there is the supporting documentation which may be submitted by parties, and depending on the volume of the supporting documentation and also on the language used in that documentation, a notifying party might be requested to establish a so-called focus summary, which would then be in English and which would summarize the content of the supporting documentation in order to facilitate the work of the Chemical Review Committee. In addition, then the Secretariat collects information on trade in this chemical, and this is also put forward for review to the Chemical Review Committee. So all these various sources of information are used by the Chemical Review Committee when reviewing a notification. And as you already now saw from this presentation, this looks as if the Chemical Review Committee has quite some work, which is indeed the case, and therefore some of this work is carried out intersessionally in order to increase the efficiency of of the CRC. And what are now the work carried out during the intersessional time? There is first the review of notifications of final regulatory actions and the proposals for listing of severely hazardous pesticide formulation. This work is done by so-called task groups. Those task groups are established to undertake a preliminary review of the notifications and the supporting documentation for those chemicals that are scheduled for the upcoming CRC meeting. Then, depending on the outcome of the review of those notifications, then the CRC may decide to establish so-called drafting groups that draft a decision guidance document when the Chemical Review Committee decides to recommend the listing of a chemical in Annex 3. In addition, there might be drafting groups that draft guidance documents that are intended to support, help, guide the work of the CRC. The task groups that are created in order to review the notifications submitted by parties or the proposals for listing of severely hazardous pesticides formulation are established by the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention in cooperation with the CRC Bureau. So the Secretariat and the Bureau, they propose a certain one or two coordinators for each task group and a certain number of CRC members that contribute to the work of the task groups. And once the task group is established, all CRC members then are informed of its composition by email, which allows, in fact, other members also to inform the task group coordinator and the Secretariat if they wish to participate in another task group to which they have not been assigned yet. In general, all CRC members are expected to participate in the work of one or, if wished, even more task groups. The task groups follows for its work a certain procedure, which starts with the forwarding of notifications and the supporting documentation to the task groups carried out by the Secretariat, and this is in order to allow the task group to do its initial review. Based on that review, the task groups then develop a report which outlines the result of the review and contains as well a recommendation for a conclusion which will be taken by the CRC whether or not the criteria of Annex 2 are met. And the task group report will then be submitted to the full CRC for consideration. The work also follows a certain schedule. Normally, the work starts about 8 weeks prior to the CRC, and this starting point is by distributing the documentation to all CRC members and posting them on the PIC website, and also by creating the task groups. Then the task group coordinators circulate an initial draft of the task group report to all task group members, which is normally done about 6 weeks prior to the Chemical Review Committee meeting. Then members have 2 weeks in order to prepare their comments and send them to the task group coordinators. So this is done 4 weeks before the CRC meeting. Then the coordinators consider those comments, finalize the report, and send it to the Secretariat. This is about 3 weeks prior to the meeting. And then the Secretariat makes the reports available on the PICS website in order to allow all CRC members and also observers to consider this report together then with the notification and the other documentation that is made available on the Rotterdam Convention website. And 1 day prior to the CRC, all task groups meet face-to-face at the CRC venue in order to, again, discuss the report, consider all the documentation, and finalize the task group report by taking into account the comments from all CRC members and also from observers. And during the CRC meeting, the task group coordinators will then present the result of the review of the task group work, and all CRC members have a discussion on those results of the review and on the task group report and decide whether all Annex 2 criteria are met and whether the chemical should be recommended for inclusion in Annex 3. If so decided, then the contact group will be established and will prepare a rationale for that decision. And this is then the final step of this procedure. Which are the chemicals that will be put forward to the next CRC meeting? There are in fact 3 chemicals: the polychlorinated naphthalene, the short-chained chlorinated paraffins, and tributyl compounds. So those notifications will be reviewed by the CRC and against the Annex 2 criteria. And if a notification meets the criteria, then the CRC will adopt a corresponding decision together with the rationale explaining how and why the CRC considers that all Annex 2 criteria are met. And if there are at least 2 notifications from 2 different PIC regions meeting the criteria of Annex 2 for a given chemical, then the CRC will adopt the decision to recommend the listing of that chemical in Annex 3 to the Rotterdam Convention. And based on that, the CRC will establish an intersessional drafting group and adopt a work plan for that drafting group in order to prepare the draft decision guidance document. When the CRC decides to recommend the listing, then the drafting group, which will be established and which also has which has normally 2 co-chairs, agrees on the work plan for the intersessional drafting group, which contains the various steps of the work that needs to be done and also a timetable. And then it will also identify the key documents to be used for the work of the drafting group. So the notifications, the supporting documentation, and other relevant information from internationally recognized sources. And then the drafting group will prepare the draft DGD intersessionally. The intersessional work is done in various steps. I will briefly go through the steps because this will then be in the next presentation explained in more detail by our colleague Anja. So the first step is that the co-chairs draft an internal proposal. They send it to the drafting group members for comments. Then the co-chairs consider the comments and establish a revised proposal. This will be sent to all CRC members and observers for comments. And then the co-chairs will again consider those comments, will prepare a new draft together with the tabular summary, which reflects all comments and how they were addressed. and the revised TGD together with the tabular summary will then be sent to the drafting group members again for comments. And then in order to finalize this process, the co-chairs will then again consider the comments, finalize the draft TGD and tabular summary, and submit it to the Secretariat, which will then ensure the translation in the UN languages, and then will forward it to the next CRC meeting for finalization of this process. One element of the technical work of the CRC is the drafting of the TGD, as already mentioned, and at the next meeting we will have two TGDs in front of us, one on the chemical metamidophos and one on severely hazardous pesticides formulations containing xanthion as an active ingredient. And possible outcomes of this work are that after the draft TGDs will be submitted to the CRC as meeting documents, the CRC will review them and finalize, and then may forward them together with the recommendation for listing to the next COP. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, one work that is carried out intersessionally by the CRC is also the drafting of guidance document, and on this slide we have one example for a particular guidance document which has been requested by the extraordinary COPs, which in fact requested the CRC and the POPROC to hold a joint meeting, which was done in October 2013, and to establish a guidance document to assist parties to the Rotterdam Convention and the Chemical Review Committee when a chemical they have under consideration is a POP. And so the joint meeting established a drafting group, which was chaired by Azari and Miriam, and this drafting group then followed the procedure as outlined before, circulated various drafts, took into account comments, and the final draft then will be submitted to both committee meetings which take place in October for finalization. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and your questions and comments are welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning, dear colleagues. I'm going to talk to you on the process and methodology of drafting DGDs, especially the case of the decision guidance document for xanthion or xanthion, as you like, ultra-low volume formulations at or above 640 grams of active ingredient per liter. So the process of drafting during the intersessional work, Jürgen told you already. Among the working procedures on the PIC web page, you find a document. It's called Process for Drafting DGDs and Accompanying Explanatory Notes. This also sets out the procedure. So as Jürgen already told you, just to remind you, if the CSC decided to recommend the listing of an SHPF, a work plan is prepared which assigns 2 co-chairs and the drafting group of CSC members, and the timelines are set out. Then the co-chairs will prepare in January usually a draft of the internal proposal for the DGD. This is sent in the second step to the drafting group members for comments. Then the co-chairs will update the proposal based on the comments of the drafting group, and they will send the DGD to all CSC members and the observers from the last meeting for commenting. Then the co-chairs will prepare again a revised drafted DGD and tabular summary, including all the comments received and how they have been addressed. I will show you a tabular summary later on. Then the draft DGD and the tabular summary of comments is sent to the drafting group for comments in the second commenting round. After this, the co-chairs are going to finalize the draft DGD based on the internal comments. Then they will send it to the secretariat, and in the last step, the DGD and the tabular summary of comments are forwarded to the CRC. This is where we are now regarding the DGD of Fenn-Sion formulation. We have some more detailed guidance on how to prepare a DGD for severely hazardous pesticide formulations. It's also on the web page where you find the guidance and the working procedures. We have two separate working papers for preparing internal proposals and DGDs, one for the banned or severely restricted chemicals and one for the SHPF. The intention of these working papers is to clarify the purpose of each section of the DGD, to characterize the information to be included, and to define acceptable information sources for each of the sections. An important issue is always the source of information that you may use in the DGD. This is mainly the information from the documents that have been available to the committee during the discussion of the proposal in the case of formulations. So you find these documents with the number of the relevant CRC. In case of Fenn-Sion, it was CRC 9, and every agenda item has a number. It's 4 for Fenn-Sion, plus 2 addenda. Generally, the wording of the description of the incidents should not be significantly changed. You should stick to what the proposing country delivered. For some sections, like further information, data from international reviews of the active substance may be used. So I'm going to show you the tabular summary of the comments received during the review of the Fenn-Sion guidance DGD. You see the commenting party, the section and page on which the comment relates, a short description of the comments, and most importantly, the response of the drafting group and the co-chairs if they accepted the comment and amended the DGD accordingly, or if not, and then why not. Just to give you an overview on the structure of the DGD on formulations, we have 3 introductory sections and then 7 sections. I'm not going to read them out because we will have a closer look later on. And we have 5 annexes. So this is from the DGD. You see the 3 introductory sections. It's introduction, purpose of the DGD, and the disclaimer. These sections contain a standard text, so you usually don't have to work on them. At the very end of the process, the meeting dates of the decisions are included in this text. And we have the standard core set of abbreviations, which is included in all DGDs. And it's going to be supplemented with those abbreviations that you use in your special chemical DGD. Then the real DGD starts. So you see the title and the chemical name. Section 1 is, of course, very important. It's the identification and uses. So in the case of formulations, this serves to clearly identify the formulation. So you need the name of the active ingredient, the relative amount in the formulation, and the formulation type, and the chemical structure of the active ingredient. Section 2 is reasons for inclusion in the PIC procedure. So in many cases, this was human health problems. Section 3. It's called Description of Common and Recognized Pattern of Use of the Formulation in the Reporting Country. We have some subsections, and you will see that you have a decision, separation of permitted uses and actual uses, so they need not necessarily to be the same, but in the case of Fention, it was the same uses. We have a subsection on restrictions in handling or use. A restriction would be, for instance, if the formulation may only be used with a special technical equipment, for instance, or we usually also include the labeling statements on use, also the need of personal protective equipment. And one subsection is availability and applicability of protective clothing. This is also in many cases an issue. Section 4, it's on description of the incidents, including adverse effects and way in which the formulation was used. The description of the incidents, usually you take it from the reporting country party. Description of the adverse effects and relationship of the adverse effects observed to the recognized acute toxicological effects of the ingredient. This section often is a bit tricky because you have to explain with the properties of the toxicological profile if they are related to the incident observed, and the extent of the incidents, which means, for instance, the number of people affected. Section 5, it's any regulatory, administrative or other measure taken by the proposing party in response to the incidents. So in some cases, after a country observes incidents, they may wish to ban or restrict the substance. The next section is the hazard classification of the formulation. In the case of Fension, we included the classification of the active substance because we didn't find the formulation classification. Section 7 is alternative pest control practices. This section includes a general text of alternatives that may be generally applied, and in case the reporting country did report on their alternative measures, they are also reported. Annex 1 includes the rationale for the recommendation of the Chemical Review Committee to include the formulation in the PIC procedure. This document is prepared during the meeting and the text is no more changed. It's just copied in the DGD. Annex 2 is the information on the reported incident from incident report. This is in principle part B of the original pesticide incident report form from the proposing country. Annex 3 is the safety data sheet of the active ingredient, which you usually find in the internet. But this is on the active ingredient because the product safety data sheets, usually we do not include them because often the applicant changes formulations, for instance. Annex 4, it's further information on the pesticide active ingredient. It's the same as Annex 1 for the DGDs for banned or severely restricted chemicals, but the structure is different. Sources of information for this annex is the information submitted by parties, of course, that has been available to the CRC, and the results of international reviews such as WHO, IPCS, JMPR or POPROC, but only international reviews, so not an assessment report from USA or the EU that you can find in the internet. And generally, the introduction to the annex should clearly state the references that you used. The level of detail and the focus should be on the area of concern and the related endpoints that are related to the incident. So in case we dealt with a human health incident, The section on human toxicology is more important compared to non-target organisms. And in order to avoid discrepancies, if you have different figures from different sources, you may give a range of values, for instance, on an LD50 figure. This is how it looks like, Annex 4. Section 1 is on physicochemical properties of the substance. Section 2 is on toxicological properties. And Section 3 is on environmental fate and effects. And I would like to give you a short comparison of the two types of DGD for banned or severely restricted chemicals and for the severely hazardous pesticide formulations. The structure of the DGD reflects the very different process behind. The DGD on the banned chemical contains 4 sections and 4 annexes. The DGD for the formulation 7 sections and 5 annexes. For the banned chemicals, the focus is on the details of the risk evaluation and the final regulatory actions of the 2 parties that submitted the notification. For the formulations, the focus is on the description of the incidences that were encountered in a developing country. The sources of information for the BSR chemicals is what has been submitted by the notifying parties. And the information source for the formulations is the information, mainly the information collected from all parties by the Secretariat. And the section further information on active ingredient is very important for the chemical, which is an active ingredient. And for the formulation, it has a different substructure and is a bit less important. Just for reasons of comparison, the structure of the DGD for banned or severely restricted chemicals. The 4 sections are identification and uses, reasons for inclusion in the PIC procedure, protective measures, and hazards and risks to human health and or the environment. The annexes are further information on the substance. This is the equivalent to Annex 4 for the formulations. Details of the final regulatory actions, addresses of the DNAs, and references. And a little bit on my experience with drafting DGDs, lessons learned or challenges. So the organization of the work and the decision finding between the co-chairs or the members of the drafting group may be a challenge. And to identify the appropriate information sources is almost always an issue. Often you receive comments, for instance, from NGOs, please include this information on toxicological properties. But if this information has not been available to the committee, it's not adequate to include it in the DGD because it's too late in the process. Sometimes you have inconsistent or contradictory information from different sources, and then it's not easy to decide what you include in the further information section. To catch the key elements of the risk evaluation for banned chemicals or the incidents for formulations, and to take account all comments received. Sometimes you receive 2 different comments on the same sentence, and then you have to decide what to do at the end. And related to the hazardous pesticide formulations, the DGD title is very important and it's always discussed. It has to clearly define the formulation, and this is also how the chemical will be listed in Annex 3 if it gets there. So of course you may not use a trade name in the title. Maybe the proposal was submitted for the trade name, but it will not be listed like that. We have 2 different kinds of defining the formulations. It's formulation X, containing active substance at or above grams per liter, or active ingredient X formulation type at or above grams per liter. The wording at or above is always added to prevent a change of the formulation in direction of an increased risk. For instance, for fentanyl, we have 640 grams per liter. If this would be included in Annex 3, the applicant might change the formulation up to 700 grams per liter, then it would not be covered. And of course, we can expect that a higher concentrated formulation would pose a higher risk even. So this has to be covered also. For example, for the paraquat formulations, we had 2 formulation types covered. In the last years, we only dealt with 2 severely hazardous pesticide formulations, so we have not really much experience with DGDs on formulations. And the incidents reported that were the basis for the proposal of the severely hazardous pesticide formulation, they tend to be very variable, chemical and use or even country specific, so you need a case-by-case reflection also in the DGD. With this, I want to thank you for your attention.